James Harper stumbled through a dark tunnel in the maze of the Berlin sewer system. His face was bruised and streaked with blood and filth. His clothes were soaked, and his labored breathing echoed off the stone walls. Behind him, the sounds of heavily armed operators grew louder, their methodical footsteps and shouted orders confirming the terrifying reality. He had served as a Green Beret his whole adult life, fighting wars for his country without question. Now, the men trying to kill him wore the same flag he once fought for. They left a Green Beret to die under a foreign city. They didn't know he was already planning a different mission: war. Earlier, before the betrayal, James still wore his uniform, but a slight, persistent limp betrayed his physical toll. The grinding of bone on bone that felt like a hot needle every time he took a step. In the privacy of a bathroom stall, he secretly administered a steroid injection to numb the throbbing ache, the cold liquid pushing into his muscle being a necessary deception just to stay in the fight. Days later, the clinical reality caught up to him. His unit was called for a routine drug test, and the steroids were detected. In a cold, sterile office that smelled of floor wax and stale coffee, his new commanding officer delivered the news with the mechanical indifference of a machine. He was being discharged immediately. Years of service, multiple deployments, and a lifetime of sacrifice were reduced to the scratch of a pen on a form, stripping him of his medical coverage and his pension in a single stroke. "You're being discharged, Sergeant." The financial pressure at home was crushing, a heavy silence that filled every room. Unpaid bills and bright red late notices sat in jagged piles on the kitchen counter, mocking his years of service. His wife tried to maintain a semblance of hope, but the raw fear for the mortgage and rising medical costs was etched into the dark circles beneath her tired eyes. Their young son, who still believed his father was an invincible hero, didn't understand why his dad was suddenly a ghost, haunting the living room. The tension eventually broke into hushed, desperate arguments in the kitchen about selling their home, or draining the last of their meager savings. The country he bled for had discarded him like a broken tool, leaving him to face a domestic battle he wasn't equipped to win. At the funeral of his comrade Mason, a friend who had taken his own life, James met his former commander, Mike. Mike, now a civilian contractor in an expensive suit, hinted at a different path. Private work that paid real money, operations off the books that still served the national interest. James stood alone at his kitchen table late that night, the cold discharge papers on one side, contemplating. The army was finished with him, but a new shadow was ready to buy what was left of his soul. James drove to a quiet ranch to meet Rusty Jennings. Rusty was supposedly a patriotic businessman, lamenting how politicians wasted good soldiers. He claimed he answered directly to the highest levels, promising good pay, clean operations, and a renewed sense of brotherhood. He slid a contract across the table with a $50,000 cash advance. James hesitated, the image of Mason's coffin flashing in his mind. But then he thought of his son's future and his wife's crushing worry. He picked up the pen and signed. At home, he lied to his wife, telling her it was a simple overseas security job, guarding facilities. She wanted the truth, but finally accepted the deception because they desperately needed the money. Before he left, he shared a short, emotional beat with his son. The kid was proud that his dad was working again, and James promised he'd be back soon. He closed his front door behind him, rucksack on his shoulder, leaving his family framed in the doorway behind him. He thought he was signing a contract to save his family, unaware he had just validated his own death warrant. The scene cut abruptly to Berlin. James met his small team, Mike, Kaufman, and Sylvie, in a safe hotel where all phones were locked away. The target was scientist Salim Mohsen, known as Sem. The official story was that he was helping develop a dangerous bioweapon. The objective was to infiltrate his lab, copy his research, and neutralize him. Mission preparation began with methodical surveillance. James tracked Sem across the city, watching him in cafes and playgrounds, identifying his lab entrance and routines. While the team mapped routes and cracked security, James felt a grim satisfaction, believing he was stopping a monster. Still, he ignored the small, nagging doubts that surfaced when he saw Sem acting like a normal father. James watched Sem laugh with his kid, then turned away to quietly load his rifle and gear. Tomorrow night, he would break into this man's life, still clinging to the lie that he was the hero of this story. Under the cover of night, the team moved on the underground lab. The operation was swift and brutal. They bypassed defenses, reached the main lab, and grabbed Sem while Kaufman downloaded the data. Sem desperately pleaded for his life. "I'm trying to save people, not kill them." Then the command changed. No extraction. Sem was to be terminated, the lab destroyed. James, his face emotionless, injected a lethal substance into Sem's IV. Sem's last words mentioned a backup of his research hidden elsewhere. Then he died. With a single injection, James crossed a line he could never uncross, realizing too late that the target wasn't the only one marked for death. The team set explosives and began their escape. Police and SWAT converged immediately. Kaufman was killed, and Sylvie was captured. James, knowing she would talk, made the hard choice to finish her quickly. With sirens closing in, he dragged a bleeding Mike and jumped into the river, vanishing into the sewer system. Deep in the tunnels, Mike was losing blood fast. James performed a crude transfusion, literally sharing his own blood, a desperate act that affirmed their bond as old war brothers. They agreed Mike would move ahead to contact command, while James rested and followed. Hours later, James reached a hotel safe point, finding a note from Mike and instructions from Rusty for an extraction at a nearby bridge. At the bridge, everything felt wrong. Unfamiliar operators, no code phrases. When they tried to push him into a car, James saw raised weapons reflected in a window and dove for cover. A gunfight erupted under the bridge. James killed several men and chased one wounded Marine into the drainage tunnels. Orders changed. You're not extraction, you're termination. In his last breaths, the man confessed the truth. The updated order from Rusty was to terminate James. Mike had already been safely recovered. The dying man handed James a photo of his family and a secret contact number. Betrayed by the very flag he carried, James was no longer a soldier. He was a loose end that his own country was desperate to cut. Driven by Sem's final words, James tracked down Sem's widow and forced her to open a safety deposit box. Inside was a tablet containing the full research. He called the number on the Marine's photo and was directed to a remote safe house where Virgil waited. Virgil didn't trust easily. He knocked James out first to check his gear, then patched him up and shared food once he was sure James wasn't a plant. "Officially, you're already dead, Harper." Virgil explained that he worked in the shadows, cleaning up messes when contractors were burned. He knew Rusty's type. Use patriotic soldiers, then kill them when they became inconvenient. He warned James that there would be no rescue, no pension, and no record. Together, they decrypted the tablet. They watched Sem in a recorded video explaining his work on an H5N1 vaccine, a formula that could stop a global outbreak. Sem warned that powerful groups saw more profit in chaos than in a cure. He hadn't been sent to stop a terrorist. He had been hired to assassinate the man who held the key to saving millions. Just as they considered how to expose the truth, a hit team attacked. Virgil was killed instantly. James triggered a gas leak and caused a massive explosion, escaping into the woods. He managed to slip back into the United States, keeping off the radar. The emotional toll was immense. He hid across the street from his own house, watching his wife live like a widow and his son play in the yard. He desperately wanted to run to them, but knew he would only bring danger. He then tracked down Mike, who lived comfortably in a nice house, laughing with his own family. The contrast was clear. One family mourned, while the other profited from the betrayal. In a parking garage, James ambushed Mike. After a struggle, James accused him of selling him out. "I couldn't fight the system." Mike admitted Rusty had declared James KIA to secure a payout for his widow, but the guilt was clear. James opened up about his deepest fear, to disappear like his own father did, to become a ghost. Overwhelmed, Mike agreed to help him take down Rusty. The brothers in arms were reunited, but this time they were declaring war on the masters who had manipulated them. Mike arranged a meeting at Rusty's compound. James hid in the vehicle, and as they reached the gate, Mike eliminated the guards. James jumped out, moving with Green Beret precision, clearing the compound in a storm of fire. Inside, James cornered Rusty. "You're a patriot, James. This is national security." James had heard those speeches before. This time, he knew it was about money and control. Rusty offered cash and an escape, but James executed him without hesitation. The man who treated soldiers like disposable tools was finished. James dragged a dying Mike into the van. Mike apologized for abandoning him, admitting he envied James's honor, and then died. James left the bodies in the van and set it ablaze. The architect of his ruin was gone, but the price of justice was paid in the blood of the only friend he had left. Finally, James walked up to his own front door. His wife collapsed in shock and relief upon seeing he was alive. His son ran into his arms. "Are you home for good this time?" The men who tried to bury him were gone, and the research survived in the shadows. James Harper, the Green Beret they left to die, had chosen his new war, protecting his family from the very world that tried to erase him. They left a Green Beret to die under a foreign city. Instead, he came home and brought the war to the men who betrayed him.